The front door was unlocked. That was the first thing I noticed. My aunt never left her door unlocked. Not during the day, not ever. She'd been careful about that for as long as I could remember. Double-checking the deadbolt before bed, keeping the chain latched when she was home alone. It was one of those habits that felt like part of who she was. Like the way she always kept a glass of water on the nightstand, or folded her grocery bags and saved them in the drawer beside the stove. So when I turned the handle and the door swung open without any resistance at all, something cold moved through my chest before I even stepped inside. I called her name. No answer. The living room was quiet. The television was off. Her reading glasses were on the arm of the couch where she always left them. Her crossword book open to a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table. Everything looked ordinary. Everything looked exactly like it should. But the house had that particular stillness. The kind you feel in your body before you can explain it with your brain. I walked toward the kitchen. She was on the floor between the counter and the table, curled slightly on her side, completely still. Her teacup had shattered beside her, the liquid already dried into a pale ring on the linoleum. For 1 second, my mind just refused to process what I was seeing, the way it does when something is too wrong to accept all at once. Then I dropped to my knees and grabbed her hand. Cold. The kind of cold that had been building for a while. "Hey," I said, "hey, wake up, I'm right here." My voice came out thin and strange. "Please wake up." She didn't move. I called 911 with hands so unsteady that I misdialed the first time. The dispatcher's voice was steady and professional and kept telling me to stay calm, and I kept saying I was calm, and I was not calm. I was a nurse. I'd spent 6 years working emergency intake. I knew what unconscious looked like. I knew what it meant when someone her age went down hard and stayed down, and the clinical part of my brain would not stop running scenarios even as the rest of me was pressing 2 fingers to her wrist, counting, whispering her name over and over, like saying it. Enough times might reach her somewhere. Her pulse was there, faint and uneven, but there. The paramedics arrived in 8 minutes. Those 8 minutes felt like a different version of my life. They worked around me efficiently, putting an oxygen mask on her, checking her vitals, communicating in the clipped shorthand of people who know what they're doing. I answered their questions. Yes, she lives alone. No, I don't know how long she's been on the floor. No, I didn't see anyone else. I heard myself talking, and I sounded almost normal. I wasn't. They loaded her into the ambulance, and I followed in my car, and I barely remember the drive. At the hospital, they took her straight into the back, and the doors closed, and I was left in the waiting area with nothing to do but sit and stare at those doors and pray. I called my husband. He said he was leaving immediately. I called my cousin next, my aunt's nephew, someone who had been close to her most of his life, who visited her regularly and lived about 40 minutes away. He picked up on the second ring, and when I told him what had happened, his voice went sharp with panic. He said he and his girlfriend would come right away. They arrived within the hour. My cousin came through the door, looking shaken, his face pale, his girlfriend close behind him with her hand on his back. He hugged me and asked what happened, and I told him everything I knew, which wasn't much. He shook his head slowly. "She was completely fine when we saw her last week," he said. "We had lunch with her. She was telling us about the new tomatoes coming in from the garden." His girlfriend nodded. She seemed so good, happy. We sat together in those plastic waiting room chairs, and the hours moved the way they do when you're frightened, too slowly and all at once. When the doctor finally came out, I was on my feet before he'd even finished crossing the room. "She's stable," he said, and I let out a breath I'd been holding since that kitchen floor. "But her condition is serious. We're running a full panel." "What are you seeing?" I asked. Nurse mode. I needed the actual answer. He looked at me carefully. "There are certain compounds in her blood work at levels that concern us, elevated in a way that's consistent with prolonged exposure rather than a single event." He paused. "We've notified the police. We're treating this as a possible poisoning case." The word landed differently than I expected. Not loud, just solid, poisoning, like a door closing. Behind me, my cousin made a sound I couldn't quite identify. His girlfriend said something quiet. I stood there and let the words settle through me and tried to think. Prolonged exposure. Not a single event, building up over time. Someone had been doing this for a while. The police came that evening. They asked questions that all circled around the same center. Who had access? Who visited regularly? Any signs of forced entry? Anything stolen? Nothing. The door had been unlocked because she'd unlocked it herself that morning. No broken windows, no disturbed locks, nothing out of place except for everything. My cousin was cooperative in a way that struck me as almost impressive in retrospect. Organized. Patient, pulling out his phone to show timestamps of text conversations with her. Calendar entries marking his visits, travel receipts from a birthday dinner he'd taken her to 2 months ago. The officers thanked us all and said they'd be in touch. That night I went home and I did not sleep. I lay in the dark next to my husband and stared at the ceiling and ran through every visit I'd made to that house. In the last 6 months, every phone call, every detail I might have noticed and set aside. She had been losing weight. I'd seen it. She'd explained it as the summer heat killing her appetite, and I'd accepted that because I'd wanted to accept it. She'd seemed more tired than usual, slower getting up from chairs, leaning on the counter sometimes when she cooked. I'd told myself it was normal. She was 68. A little slowing down was normal. I'd told myself a lot of things that now felt like willful blindness. Those small moments existed. I'd been present for all of them. Something in me had noticed and I had looked away, and now I was lying in the dark at 2 in the morning, with the weight of that sitting on my sternum. The days that followed had a particular quality of suspension, like being inside a held breath. I was at the hospital as much as they'd allow. My aunt drifted in and out, sometimes alert and reaching for my hand, sometimes somewhere farther away. Her face slack, her breathing shallow. The doctors used the phrase chronic accumulation with a carefulness that told me they were being conservative, choosing words that wouldn't alarm before they had full confirmation. Whatever was in her system had been introduced slowly, carefully, in doses designed not to be noticed until it was too late to trace easily. My cousin came most days. He brought flowers, yellow tulips because those were her favorites, something I hadn't told him. He'd known it himself. He sat beside her bed when I needed to step away. One afternoon, I came back from the cafeteria and found him in the chair beside her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, just watching her breathe. He looked up when I walked in. His eyes were red. I handed him a coffee and sat down, and we didn't say much. What was there to say? We were both waiting. We were both afraid. At least that's what I believed then. My husband was quieter than usual during those days. He asked questions when we were home. Specific ones, about the timeline, about who had been to the house, and when, about the details of what the doctors were finding. He had always been that way. Methodical, careful, the kind of person who builds an accurate picture before he says anything. During a normal week, I found it reassuring. During that week, it made me feel like at least one of us was still thinking clearly. One evening, he came and sat beside me in the hospital corridor, and he asked how I was doing, and I told him honestly that I didn't know. Nothing adds up, I said. There's no one who would do this. She doesn't have enemies. She doesn't have anything worth taking. He nodded slowly. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I've been thinking about access, about who was in that house regularly enough and trusted enough that she wouldn't question anything they touched. The police asked all of that. I know. He looked at his hands. I want to go check something at the house. What are you looking for? He met my eyes. I'll tell you when I'm sure. He stood up, squeezed my shoulder once, and walked toward the elevator. I watched him go and felt something cold and formless settling in my stomach, something I was not ready to name. He came back the following morning. I knew from his face, before a single word left his mouth. There was an expression he got when he'd worked through something to its end. Not satisfied, not relieved, just finished. Resolved. Like he'd reached the bottom of something and found what was there. Sit down, he said. Just say it. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table anyway. His phone was in his hands. You remember the baby monitor she had? He said. The one she set up by the front hallway. I frowned. The old one. She used it to hear the door. My aunt had some hearing loss in her right ear, nothing severe, but enough that she sometimes missed knocking. She'd set up a baby monitor years ago, transmitter near the entryway, receiver in whatever room she was in, so she could hear visitors arrive. She upgraded it about 2 years ago, he said. I helped her connect it to her Wi-Fi. The new model saves audio clips to a cloud account, motion activated. 30 days of rolling storage. He looked at me. She gave me the login when I set it up, in case she ever forgot her password. My heart was doing something deliberate and strange. The transmitter is close to the kitchen, he said. Close enough. He set the phone on the table between us. He opened an audio file and pressed play. At first it was just the ambient sounds of an empty afternoon. The refrigerator, the soft creak of the house settling, traffic somewhere outside. Then footsteps. 2 sets, unhurried, the footsteps of people comfortable in a space they know well. My cousin's voice. Clear and casual, the way he always sounded when he was relaxed. His girlfriend's voice underneath it. They were talking about something inconsequential at first. Something about a restaurant, about whether to get dinner on the way home. Then I heard it. The soft sound of a cabinet opening. The distinct clink of a glass lid being lifted. His girlfriend's voice quieter now. How much this time? My cousin, same amount. Stir it in until it's dissolved. It has to be even. A pause, the soft sound of something being mixed. His girlfriend, she mentioned the lawyer again. Did you manage to push it back? My cousin, she hasn't called yet. I told her there was no rush, that she should wait until she felt more settled. A brief pause, she's not going to feel more settled. His girlfriend said something I couldn't quite make out. Then my cousin again. We should go before she comes back in. The cabinet closing. The lid replaced with a careful, deliberate sound. Footsteps moving away. Then quiet. I sat very still. My husband's hand covered mine on the table, but I didn't feel it for a moment. I was still inside that audio, still in that kitchen, hearing those voices moving through the ordinary sounds of an ordinary afternoon while they did something that was anything but ordinary. The tea canister. The green glass canister on the second shelf, the one she'd had for 20 years, the one she refilled from the loose-leaf bags she ordered online. She drank from it every single morning, had for as long as I could remember. Had been drinking from it for as long as they had been visiting. The will, I said, my voice came out flat. She told him she was updating it, my husband said quietly. Leaving the house to you. He's been delaying it. Telling her there's no rush, that she should wait. My aunt had mentioned it to me once, months ago, almost as an aside. She'd said she wanted to get her affairs in order, that she wanted the house to go to someone who would live in it and love it. I had been at that conversation. My cousin had been at that conversation. I remembered something crossing his face briefly when she said it. Something that smoothed away almost immediately, like a hand smoothing a bedsheet. I'd thought nothing of it. That house had been in the family for 30 years. In that neighborhood, in this market, it was worth close to $400,000. He had been there every week, helping with groceries, running errands, refilling the canister, being the devoted relative, the one who showed up, who called, who remembered the yellow tulips. And all along he had been patient in a way that now felt like the patience of someone counting down. He had also been the one who helped her set up the monitor. He just hadn't known she'd given the login to my husband for safekeeping. Quietly, practically, the way she handled anything she considered important. He had built the very thing that undid him. We took the recordings to the detective that afternoon. My husband sent the audio files from the parking lot of the police station before we'd even walked inside. The detective listened without expression, asked precise questions about the monitor and the cloud account and the access, and then asked us to wait. An hour later, he told us they were moving forward. They would pull the canister from the house for testing. They wanted both of them to come in. My cousin and his girlfriend were brought in for questioning that same evening. I was not there for that. I sat at home with my husband, and the hours moved slowly, and I stared at nothing and tried to remember how to breathe. When the detective called, his voice was steady. They've been placed under arrest, he said. Attempted murder, first degree, both of them. I thanked him and ended the call and sat on the couch for a long time without moving. My aunt woke up 4 days later, fully, properly, knowing where she was and what day it was and who I was. She looked at my face the moment I walked in and said, "You've been crying," with the directness she'd always had, the way she could read me across a room before I'd said a word. I sat beside her and I held her hand and I told her everything. I had rehearsed it a dozen times and every version was wrong. There was no right version. So I just told her plainly, the recordings, the canister, what they'd said, what it meant, and why. She listened without interrupting. I watched her face as I spoke, the careful stillness of it, the way her eyes moved slowly, like she was tracking something very far away. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "He was the one who helped me set up that monitor," she said, very soft. "He set up the whole account." I hadn't thought of that until she said it. He had set it up. He just hadn't known about the backup login, the one she'd quietly handed to my husband, because that was how she operated. She trusted my husband with the things that mattered, the way she trusted me. My aunt turned toward the window. The afternoon light was coming in through the blinds in long pale stripes across the blanket on her bed. "I defended him," she said quietly. "Over the years, when people would say things, that he was difficult, that something was off, I always defended him. I said he had a hard time, that he loved this family, underneath everything." She was quiet. "I don't think I can say that anymore." She didn't cry in front of me. Her eyes stayed dry, and I understood that. Sometimes grief that goes deep enough doesn't have a surface expression. It just becomes part of you, settles in, takes up residence somewhere below language. The trial came 6 months later. The toxicology matched. A compound found dissolved in the canister that corresponded precisely with what had accumulated in her blood work, a substance that could be purchased legally, that broke down slowly in the body, that in small regular doses would look like a gradual decline rather than poisoning. The audio recordings were admitted as evidence. The prosecution laid out the timeline with a steadiness that left no shadow of ambiguity. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty, both counts, attempted murder, first degree. 25 years to life. I was sitting in the gallery when the verdict was read. I had expected the relief to feel bigger somehow, like window opening, like something finally able to move. Instead, I felt a deep and quiet exhaustion, the exhaustion of a long, terrible thing finally reaching its end. I passed close to my cousin on the way out of the courtroom. He didn't look at me. I didn't look at him. Whatever there had been between us had ended somewhere I couldn't identify. Maybe the moment I pressed play on that audio file. Maybe earlier. Maybe the moment he stood at his mother's kitchen counter and stirred something into a glass jar and called it the same. 8 months have passed since that afternoon. My aunt still lives in her house. The yellow house on the corner with the garden. She tends on good days and watches from the window on harder ones. She's recovered more than anyone expected, which the doctors credit to her constitution, and which I credit to the specific variety of stubbornness she's cultivated over 68 years of living. She is not exactly who she was before all of this. There are hours when she goes quiet in a way she never used to, when I'll catch her somewhere inside herself and ask if she's all right, and she'll just nod slowly and say she's thinking. I don't push, I sit with her. Sometimes I make tea, from the new canister, the white ceramic one I bought at the shop near the hospital. And we drink it together at the kitchen table and talk about small things. The garden, the neighbors, whatever's on her crossword. Sometimes that feels like enough. Sometimes it is enough. The will was finalized last spring. She called the lawyer herself, without telling me in advance, and mentioned it afterward, the way she might mention having rescheduled a dentist appointment. I told her she didn't have to think about any of that right now. She said she knew. She said she wanted to anyway. I think about instinct a lot these days. I think about the months that preceded that Tuesday. The weight she lost that I explained away as summer heat. The unsteadiness I attributed to age. The moment she mentioned the will. And I watched something move across his face and disappear and let myself not examine it. Those moments existed. I was present for everyone. Something in me registered each one and quietly filed it somewhere I wasn't paying attention to. I don't know exactly what the lesson is in that. I don't know if there's a way to be more awake to those small signals. To trust the part of yourself that notices before the rest of you does. Maybe that's not something you can reliably train yourself toward. Maybe the only lesson is simpler. Check on the people you love. Not someday when life eases up. Not next month when things settle now. Today. Before the door that should be locked is standing open. Before the teacup is already broken on the floor. I almost arrived too late. I am still, every single day, so grateful that I didn't. Because sometimes the cruelest harm in the world wears the face of someone who knows your favorite flowers. Someone who shows up when you call. Someone who cries real tears in the right waiting room and says all the right things while quietly, carefully, doing something you never thought to look for. And the only thing standing between the people we love and that kind of harm is the grace of someone who chose to stop by unexpectedly on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I will never wait for a convenient time again.